Hey guys, so we need to talk about season 3 of Squid Game. It's the #1 show on Netflix around the world. Deservedly so, even though I have a lot of reservations with season 3, but it's so good, even with its flaws, and there's, I think, a ton of flaws. It is still so good to watch. So if you haven't seen it and you're just like, oh, I don't want to hear of any spoilers, well, spoiler alert, there's going to be some spoilers. It's like, why am I not going to tell you if the chicken salad that's sitting in the shade has been spoiled or not? Be like, oh, well, I don't want to spoil it for you. Why don't you find out? Well, we're going to go into this because there was a bit of, I don't know who it was, but somebody did our main character, our main hero, Gi-hun, player 456. Yes, Jung-jae, they did him so dirty and wrong. This was on another level. Yes, there was a baby in there, but it wasn't childhood neglect. This was like character neglect, narrative neglect of Mr. 456. The meta-thematical question was, do you still have faith in people? Because what we saw, especially from season 1, is that a lot of people in this late stage capitalism, a lot of people are trying to say but in this very dystopian world that we're in, if you have too much faith and trust in people, you get taken advantage of to the point where you're in such dire straits, been so exploited that you feel like the only option out of your hell and misery on earth is to enter the Squid Games to hopefully solve that problem. Well, the question had to be answered by our main character, who was asked that and still struggled with that in season 1, and he had to be answering that in season 3, but yet they muted him for almost 4 episodes, 5 episodes. Behind the scenes, what happened? Because this reeks to me of Jung-jae got punished for some reason. I don't know if he said no to one too many spirit cooking dinners because he's on a diet, or if he was also embattled in a thing about money for his contract, and then they said why don't we put you on a per word contract to pay you by the word, and then they're like, haha, delete all of his words, and got him for 50 cents. What was going on with him being mute and handcuffed and just in a state of what they said was traumatic PTSD? Yes, I sort of understand that theoretically. Now, this is when it started off on a wrong foot. All of the characters started to then become ideas or concepts or more philosophies, rather than being oh my God, these are the realest human beings I've ever seen in a very unreal situation. And that is what we needed, because, and especially season 1 delivered that to us, because to really see a real person, how they really would respond under pressure that shows who they are, you have to put them in an unreal environment. If you're in the so-called real world, which is essentially unreal because a lot of things, like air conditioning, if indoor plumbing goes out, oh yeah, that gets real, unreal, real. But it keeps us in a state of, a cordial civilization and society, which is good. But you kind of don't really know exactly how real somebody is. And most of us, we don't really want to know. But as humanity's exploration of the self and society, we really appreciate shows like Squid Game that allow us to go in there without having to sacrifice our toilet not flushing, or, the grocery store being empty, riots on the streets because there's no gas in the gas stations. We appreciate it for that moment, but season 2 and season 3, it started to become like these characters were more archetypes because they didn't change. In season 1, with each character, we had a love-hate relationship with each one. And no matter how much you loved some character, you kind of hated aspects of them. For example, Gi-hun, our main character 456, yes, in the end we were like, oh my god, what a cool like character and like a man of, you know, honor. But really, when you saw in the beginning of the season and throughout, you saw him waver between being a real selfish, weak, afraid, looking for the easy way out type of person. His mother had diabetes. He had a gambling addiction. His daughter fled to the US with, you know, his ex-wife and the new husband. Like, he was really like kind of a cringe character that changed because of his experience in this game environment to grow, albeit at a very high personal cost and some real physical torment. But we also saw like Sang-woo, the corporate fraud, who was like, you know, about to off himself in the bathtub. He double-crossed the guy that was on his team, you know, so you saw like, you know, he was supposed to be like the trustworthy, you know, finance guy, succeeded by graduating from a prestigious university and then just being the real kind of betrayer, Sebyuk, you know, the North Korean defector that looked like she was just gonna be like bop bop bop, you know, everybody, but then she you know, basically having no limit to just wanting to win, but then really reminding character 456 is that like, no, you're not the type of person to, you know, off somebody deliberately. You are a human. And then, you know, even players like 001, you know, the original one, the old man, the creator of the games, you're just like thinking, oh my god, what a sympathetic, you know, character. And then you find out he's like the evil mastermind tricking everybody to be in the game for his own perversion of just like, oh, I want to feel something again. So you saw, but then you liked the old man, you hated the old man, you liked the defector girl, you hated the, you know, all the characters. Oh my god, especially that woman who kept going into the bathroom to smoke, and then her like on again off again like sort of like side thing boyfriend in the games. They were the most extreme, I think, when you're just like love hate love hate love hate, because it was kind of fun to see both of them like really be actual people. And what we got to see is really how they responded from pressure. You want to see what kind of juice is in a fruit, you got to squeeze it. You can't just look at an orange without peeling it and be like, oh, I like the idea of that orange. I think that orange is going to be ripe. It looks ripe. It should be ripe, but then you never squeeze it. Then what are we here for? So player 456, he was presumably chained to the bedpost in punishment for inciting a resurrection, leading a revolution that failed, a coup d'etat that failed, where his best friend had perished at, you know, in the battle, and then he led a lot of people to their demise when he tried to, you know, storm, you know, like essentially storm the Bastille, and then, you know, off with all of their heads who are, you know, in the game. But it doesn't make sense to me that somebody who failed like that would then brood, because that is not the type of people who go into Squid Games. If the salesman is doing his job properly to filter the contestants. Squid Game itself structurally had a gift from basically the writer came up with this mechanism to test who would be so desperate, self-defeating, and willing to try to stake something to win whatever. It's just like at that point in the subway, like less than $100. That itself was a fortunate and genius move in the Squid Game world, to always have characters in the Squid Game that is going to bring the most excitement and depth to the screen. They sort of failed that filtration test on season 2 and season 3. The people that came in did not seem like they really were supposed to be there. First of all, it turned into, like I said, archetypes. Each character was already coded from the beginning. Good character, bad character. And they stayed good character with a lot of, challenges, but they're still such a good character. Bad character. Ooh, evil character, but with challenges, but they stayed evil. There was no twists or turns. What Squid Game is really insightful about is that all of us, we're supposed to be, seeing ourselves in the characters in one aspect or another. But even if specifically it's not gonna be the same, at the core of it, it's really like how you make a choice between the easy bad way out that seems to be guaranteed, or the good way that seems to be a little bit difficult and not likely to work out. Do you do it for only yourself? Do you sacrifice for others? Do you try to find a win-win? Anyways, it goes back and forth. Every character has to go back and forth between good decisions, bad decisions, whatever that may mean, but we know that it means something to each individual character. We got to see the variance. So Gi-hun, first of all, would not just be silent. This dude even bought a pink motel, set up a target range shooting practice station in the pink motel, and was hunting down the games for years. You think that he loses one little insurrection battle, he's just gonna go mute? I don't think so. That's why I think they, tricked him into a per word contract on his season 3 re-up. Now let's talk about the frontman, because this also sort of failed. Because shouldn't Gi-hun also be wondering, where the heck did the frontman go? My buddy, my pal, the guy that was so pivotal in this whole, resurrection and then insurrection, and then also in season 2. And why did they wait until episode 5 to reveal that, oh, the frontman is actually part of the games? And then there's that shock for Mr. 456 to be like, oh, I was so betrayed. That should have actually, I think, happened in season 1. And so even if he was on his per word contract and he had to brood and be silent, at least there's something else going on in his brain that could be more interesting that he has to wrestle with. Because otherwise he just looked like he was hungry, like it was more of like an Ozempic chain up. Next, where did all the women go? Okay, the games ended with only guys, which was a little bit odd because it was so like, you gotta admit, it veered a little bit on the manufactured side of it being more like, okay, we gotta cover this issue, social issue, this 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is not so bad, but it then suddenly it turning into all male at the end, it just kind of didn't match. And so the women in this series, they also seemed a bit like more like ideas or archetypes, and the actors, I think, and everybody who made it happen did the best they could and really did bring it to life. But I didn't really like how, like, at the end it was only guys. Like, why wasn't there any women that made it to the end? I mean, the game before the final was jump rope, okay? You're telling me that all those ajashis was jump roping and had extensive jump roping experience over women? It didn't jive, okay? Especially in the maze game. They had 30 minutes to get out of there. They were literally being hunted by killers. And yet the trio of the 3 ladies, who are all great characters and, well acted, but oh, come on. They were being that chatty when they were supposed to be like not making a sound. Each one had a TED Talk, okay? Then they figured out the secret key situation. Then a girl went into labor. Then the other old grandma lady delivered a baby, with all of the labor, and the screaming, and yet, they're being hunted by killers. and they still had like 10 minutes to spare. How you gonna do? How that makes no sense in 20 minutes. There's people who said, like can't even put on their hospital gown in 20 minutes, and then they go through like a 12-hour labor. It just didn't jive, and I think it jarred things, and it ruined the tempo and the gripping, like moment by moment adrenaline nature of the games. The two things, the one, actually I would say the one game that really did that was the jump rope game, and that had the most original feeling of season 1, where each moment you were gripped and paid attention, and how each person played the game showed their character. They wasn't talking about what kind of people they were. So the two biggest problems I found with this season 3 and season 2 was, number one, everybody talking about themselves instead of showing who they are, and the voting scenes. So the voting scenes, like, I get it, they were trying to emphasize that it was a democratic situation, but the difference was when season 1, it actually was a different outcome that you didn't know would happen. Did they end the games or not? They ended the games, they all went back to their lives, and that was the, I think, best structural, even if you want to keep it as a formula, have them go back to their normal lives, show us, not have them tell us why they are, suffering, show us their pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses in their own life, and then show us again how they feel like, and yet this is too much of a hell in real life that I'm willing to go back to the games. That's an active character. And remember, these games, as much as they're saying like, oh, it's about these people suffering in late stage capitalism, actually, when you really look at it, these games are about the VIPs who are ordering up this sick entertainment experience. And this type of situation, late stage capitalism, late stage imperialism, late stage feudalism, late stage, I don't know, like Egyptian pyramidism. All this stuff was there regardless of capitalism. So we have to remember that these sickos want to see characters that are going to be more active. They're not going to be like glum and chained, and then be like, I gave up. Those are the characters those are the people who don't go to the Squid Game. And what I found was a huge problem with this season 2, season 3 of the characters in the Squid Games. It looked like a lot of those people kind of ended up there. They're like, I don't actually want to be here, but they were stuck because all of the voting always went to continue the games. So why did we have to watch all of the button pushing? If anything, you pan the camera to the back, there's always those people talking in the back of the class. Yeah, they're having the most interesting conversations. They're doing scheming, wheeling, dealing. Like, we want to see, if you're going to be talking about yourself that much, do it during, do two things at once. Voting thing up above, and then people talking a lot more, which we had a lot more, I think, in season 1, and in a way that advanced the plot a little bit more effectively. But you don't want to have people who are there, like, that grandma lady, because she was so good. She started good, she ended good, and she wanted to always end the game and stop the game, and she didn't want to be there. Season 1 gave them a chance. With the voting, there was enough people who the script turned out where enough people voted. The ones who didn't want to come back didn't come back, which meant that we never got to see an objective, like, third party, us as the viewer looking in on the real lives of these players. We had to depend mainly on their recollection, their reason. I have to be here because, my business went kaput, or I want to go to Thailand for, an operation. Like, you have to trust what they say, and then there's no other context to it. The closest we got to that situation was this really convoluted thing in season 2 about the North Korean defector who worked, in one of those costumes at the amusement park, befriending the daughter of a caricature artist who also worked at the amusement park, finding out that she was, dealing with some terminal disease and they couldn't afford the treatment, and she ended up being one of the guards and he ended up being one of the players, and there was that, that kind of stuff. But again, it was like she entered like she's a good person even though she's doing, this thing, and there was not much variance there. She just ended up, she's a good person, and then he's a good person, and then they're trying to save, this baby. So there was a lot of this theme, though, about like saving baby, sacrificing, for the baby. And I think that, that was good. That was like a dramatic tool, but we didn't see a real like hesitation. There was the, the North Korean defector trying to save the caricature artist to save his daughter. There was the baby that actually was delivered, in that 20-minute labor, and also playing the games and escaping, people with knives coming at them in a maze. Saving that baby at the end as well. And then the grandma hesitating on whether to save her own child. Now, this was, maybe you can argue like, oh, well, it showed that she did have a hesitation. I don't think so, because she stayed with the archetype of like somebody so principled that she's willing to sacrifice her own son to be fair to loyalty and to the actual baby. A more realistic scene would be her wavering back and forth. Save the son or save the baby. Save the son or save the baby. And more realistically, it would be like she'd choose her son and be like, okay, adios, baby. Especially since the son wasn't even that bad of like an evil of a character, because he also entered as like, oh, I'm kind of like a person that got manipulated by the world, I'm still like a good person. So again, it was just kind of like everyone was so flat, and the flat people, that flatness is actually realistic in the sense that, if you're kind of saying like that's a real person in the real world, but those types of people would probably find less dramatic situations to solve their problems than entering a Squid Game and, doing the most there. They would not have even probably passed the subway dakji test with the salesman. So it just rang a little bit hollow. So the ending, of course, with Gi-hun sacrificing himself at the end to save the baby without trying to pull a Katniss Hunger Games situation. Remember when Katniss pulled something where like there were actually 2 winners of the Hunger Game and she fooled the system? We didn't see him try any tomfoolery. The Gi-hun we know would have been like pampering something up there and trying to figure out a way so that he can make sure that he would still also be alive in some format. So it just didn't really seem like it made much sense to me. And so it really did feel like there was some heavy hand that was like really messing up our Jung-jae's like performance potential from the script. So I'm a little bit upset because I think somebody did him wrong. And also Lee Byung-hun, like it was almost as if you're trying to dim the light of these 2 big stars, and these 2 guys, 2 big divas. It's almost as if like, you put Mariah Carey and Celine Dion in the same concert. Okay, the fact that these 2 guys showed up together on set and doing all of the press afterwards, like that type of a diva, you gotta respect them more in the actual show. So not that anybody from Netflix is asking, but we're here in Seoulite TV land. So how would I have changed the situation? Well, going back to season 2, because essentially that's the beginning of this complete season 2 and 3, I would have had a situation like in season 1. They're quickly in the new games with the new cast, play a game, they vote themselves like, oh, let's, stop this situation, because we have seen from the actual real season 2 and 3, there are a lot of people who did not want to play that game and they were like dead weight on the show. And so we should go out and see them in action in their real lives and get showing not telling about why we should care about their lives and what they're fighting for in the games. But this is what I would do to link together player 456 and the detective and the North Korean defector. I would have a situation where the defector finds out some clue that leads her to the detective. The detective goes and finds player 456, and at that point he re-enters the game, and they enter as like a trio out to get the games, and even have the detective this time go in as a participant and then see his brother show up undercover as player 001, and then have this tension about like they gotta stay quiet about this because they both can't reveal themselves, but then there's this tension and all this kind of stuff. But will there be a chance for a spinoff or another season? Officially, the director says no, it's over, and really, nothing has been confirmed. And I think perhaps nothing has really been confirmed, but there is a lot of talk in the air that there's gonna be a US remake. I think Squid Game as a concept almost can be like a perennial, like, as if like, Big Brother season 24 or something like that, continue on forever like as a soap opera, because it can continuously change the games and the people in there. It could be really done well, almost like forever. But what was the clue that we saw about perhaps a US adaptation? Yes, Cate Blanchett. Oh, Cate Blanchett was stunt cast in the United States doing the role of the salesman in an alley, and she was playing that Korean game. Gi-hun was just kind of like, what's that girl doing with the blonde hair tied up like that? So it looks like that there might be a situation where there's Squid Game. Yes, Cate Blanchett was amazing, phenomenal in that short period of time, but as much as I really love Cate Blanchett, I said like, Korean people love a Tilda Swinton. I think Tilda Swinton should have been doing that cameo, because she has a little bit more of this kind of like bone-chilling edge to to her performances, and I know she could have done that as well. Cate Blanchett was very mystique-iness, and I think she could also be in Squid Game US, but more probably on like, she should be like the VIP coordinator, manager, like, something in like that genre of the game. And then, down on the street, we have Miss Tilda Swinton just slapping around people, because we already saw her do that in many roles. But if you really believe the rumors, it might be an English language spin-off, Squid Game America, by David Fincher. And it would be a darker kind of American style remake of it, with a tentative shoot date late 2025 in Los Angeles. But they say like, nothing is confirmed. Well, if nothing's confirmed, and we're here in the Seoulite TV studios, this is how I would do it. Start it off on a cruise ship. That's the recruitment. That's the tantalization. Get these people who are like, chicken-headed, excessive, but real kind of weird, aggressive. Put it on a cruise ship to hell and take some references from real life, from the poop cruise, and see what happens when the toilets don't work, the food is not there, there's no electricity, and have that be the first stage of the Squid Game, even before they get to the island where they go on to the next part of the game. So what did you guys think? Did you see Squid Game 3 with a different lens? And are you excited about a potential spin-off either in the United States or a continuation somehow in the Korean version? Is this something you'd want to see? I think you should speak up, because I would love to continue to see this format, this world play out, because I think there's so many more threads that can be told and really be enjoyed by the public around the world. All right, guys, put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.